Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Can I please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Srila Prabhupada and yourself. I've got a slight problem. My son has just come off the bus and I've literally just come through the door 10 minutes ago. I've got to prepare so we can get back out at 5, 6 in the morning to catch the bus. I can listen in, but I can't partake because I've got to clear up and get everything ready for him now to eat and everything. Is that okay with you if I just listen in?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Will somebody tell me exactly the address to the reading?
It's Canto 4, chapter. I don't know whether we finished chapter 5 or.
We are on chapter 6.
Chapter 6. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
It did not come out clear where it was. Chapter 4.
Canto 4, chapter 6, Prabhuji.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome. So, anybody remember anything from last week? How can we forget? Quite a
It was about, yeah, sorry. It was about the yagna that was performed by Daksha and how he insulted Lord Shiva and Sati quits her body. And then there's a lot of curses and counter curses and a lot of destruction.
yeah, that's right. And finishing up, Sati left her body, and then Daksha or Shiva sent what do they call him? I forget his name.
Virabhadra.
Virabhadra. And he, with all these, all Lord Shiva's followers, and they completely ruined the sacrifice and punished all the demigods who'd offended Lord Shiva, and he chopped Daksha's head off. And so, the demigods were left wondering what to do. So that's where we pick up. And the main point is that, when we offend a great person, there's always a calamity. So it's best to, tolerance is the first principle in spiritual life. Tolerate the happiness and distress. Difficulties will come and they will go. So, don't be too affected by them. We have to deal with them, but we shouldn't become so affected that we lose our composure, We're able to remain keep our intelligence intact, and be too materially attached, then we'll lose our intelligence. Jaito Vishayam Pungsha Sangat Teshu Vichayate Sangat Sangjayate Karma Karma Kora Vichayate. We become while contemplating the objects of the sense, one develops attachment, and then that strong attachment, it impairs our discrimination, and that's what happens when we're offended or somebody, criticizes us. We can actually lose our intelligence and start criticizing back. And obviously, in certain situations, we have to speak as mind, we have to speak the truth, but it shouldn't disturb us, we should be cool. And Lord Shiva remained cool. He just left the situation because he didn't want to make things any worse. He thought if I leave, then everything else, they'll stop fighting. And so now the demigods are going to, so look, we got to, we're on to chapter 6 now. So we can start from the top today. Did we start from the top last week? Or from the bottom? I can't remember. I think we started from the bottom. So, Bhuvaneshwar Mataji, can you read Canto 4, Chapter 6, text number 1?
And Hare Krishna, Chapter 6, Brahma satisfies Lord Shiva. Text 1. All the priests and other members of the sacrificial assembly and all the demigods, having been defeated by the soldiers of Lord Shiva and injured by weapons like tridents and swords, approached Lord Brahma with great fear. After offering him obeisances, they began to speak in detail of all the events which had taken place. Text 3. Both Lord Brahma and Vishnu had already known that such events would occur in the sacrificial arena of Daksha, and knowing beforehand, they did not go to the sacrifice. Text 4. When Lord Brahma heard everything from the demigods and the members who had attended the sacrifice, he replied, "You cannot be happy in executing a sacrifice if you blaspheme a great personality and thereby offend his lotus feet. You cannot have happiness in that way." Text 5. You have excluded Lord Shiva from taking part in the sacrificial results, and therefore you are all offenders at his lotus feet. Still, if you go without mental reservations and surrender unto him and fall down at his lotus feet, he will be very pleased. Text 6. Lord Brahma also advised them that Lord Shiva is so powerful that by his anger, all the planets and their chief controllers can be destroyed immediately. Also, he said that Lord Shiva was especially sorry because he had recently lost his dear wife and was also very much afflicted by the unkind words of Daksha. Under the circumstances, Lord Brahma suggested it would behoove them to go at once and beg his pardon. Text 7. Lord Brahma said that no one, not even himself, Indra, all the members assembled in the sacrificial arena, or all the sages could know how powerful Lord Shiva is. Under the circumstances, who would dare to commit an offense at his lotus feet? Text 8. After thus instructing all the demigods, the Pitas, and the lords of the living entities, Lord Brahma took them with him and left for the abode of Lord Shiva, known as the Kailash hill. Text 9. The abode...
Okay, stop there. So now they go there and it's a description of Mount Kailash. So we don't have to go through the whole description. I mean, it's nice to go through it, but we're dealing with the main thing is it's like the spiritual world in the material world. It was so nice. A big banyan tree was there, and it was so many yojanas high and so many yojanas wide, and that's where Lord Shiva used to sit and meditate. It was so peaceful. Usually in a tree there's nests and birds chirping away, but it was just completely silent. There was no noise. Just perfect for meditating, and all the great sages would meditate with Lord Shiva there also. And basically, it was like paradise, just like we'd expect, the spiritual world to be. This is explained. So we can start from text 22. Who's next? Goridas, Pandit. Text 22.
Krishna Maharaj. Text 22. There is a small lake named Alakananda in which Sati used to take her bath, and that lake is especially auspicious. All the demigods, after seeing this specific beauty of Kailash hill, were struck with wonder at the great opulence opulence to be found there. Thus, the demigods saw the wonderfully beautiful region known as halaka in the forest known as Saugandika, which means full of fragrance. The forest is known as Saugandika because of its abundance of lotus flowers. They also saw the two rivers named Nanda and Alakananda. Alakananda. These two rivers were sanctified by the dust of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda. My dear Kapua, Vidura, the celestial damsels came down to these rivers in their aeroplanes with their husbands, and after a sexual enjoyment, they enter the water and enjoy sprinkling their husbands with water. After the damsels of the heavenly planets bathe in the water, it becomes yellowish and fragrant due to the kunkuma from their bodies. Thus the elephants come to bathe there with their wives and she-elephants, and they also drink the water, although they are not thirsty. The airplanes of the heavenly denizens are bedecked with pearls, gold, and many valuable jewels. The heavenly denizens are compared to clouds in the sky decorated with occasional flashes of electric lightning. While traveling, the demigods passed over the forest known as Sagandika, which is full of varieties of flowers, fruits, and desire trees. While passing over the forest, they also saw the reasons of Yakshavara. In the celestial forest, there were many birds whose necks were colored reddish and whose sweet sounds mixed with the humming of the bees. The lakes were abundantly decorated with crying swans as well as strong steamed lotus flowers. Text 30. All those atmospheric influences unsettled the forest elephants who flocked together in the sandalwood forest, and the blowing wind agitated the minds of the damsels there for further sexual enjoyment. Text 31. They also saw that the bathing ghats and their staircases were made of Vaidura money. The water was full of lotus flowers. Passing by such lakes, the demigods reached a place where there was a great banyan tree.
So let's just stop there. So it's described that, you know, when there's a nice atmosphere, like in the material world, it awakens appetite for sexual enjoyment. But this place, it's like the spiritual world. It's in contrast. You know, everybody in the spiritual world, even though it's actually much more satisfying condition, it does the exact opposite. People are freed from because they actually center everything around Krishna, around the Supreme Lord, then they're completely satisfied. And, you know, people think that, you know, attraction to sex in the material world is actually going to make them satisfied ultimately, but it actually doesn't. It makes them worse. So this is a benediction of the spiritual world, that there's all opulence there, but it doesn't awaken material desires. You know, it's like a fire. Lust is like a fire which is never satisfied by any amount of fuel that we supply to it. It just increases the fire instead of decreasing it. So, you know, the aim is to, you know, minimize this sexual enjoyment as much as possible so that we remain sane. And in that sane condition, we can go forward in spiritual life. Otherwise, it just becomes too much of a distraction. Okay, who's next? I'm seeing Mataji can't join in, she's busy. But she's here, she's listening. Haridas Prabhu. There's no Mataji, no
Catherine.
Catherine this week.
Yeah, she's busy. She's working a bit late today.
Okay.
Yeah. What text are we on?
We're on text 32.
32.
This is when they go into the forest, they see Lord Shiva and the banyan tree. This is a description now.
Okay. Text 32. That banyan tree was 800 miles high, and its branches spread over 600 miles around. Big tree. The tree cast a fine shade, which permanently cooled the temperature, yet there was no noise of birds. Text 33. The demigods saw Lord Shiva sitting under that tree, which was competent to give perfection to mystic yogis and deliver all people. As grave as time eternal, he appeared to have given up all anger. Text 34. Lord Shiva sat there, surrounded by saintly persons like Kubera, the master of the Goyakas, and the four Kumaras, who were already liberated souls. Lord Shiva was grave and saintly. Text 35. The demigods saw Lord Shiva, situated in his perfection as the master of the senses, knowledge, fruitive activities, and the path of achieving perfection. He was the friend of the entire world, and by virtue of his full affection for everyone, he was very auspicious. Text 36. He was seated on a deer skin and was practicing all forms of austerity. Because his body was smeared with ashes, he looked like an evening cloud. On his hair was the sign of a half moon, a symbolic representation. Text 37. He was seated on a straw mattress and speaking to all present, including the great sage Narada, to whom he specifically spoke about this absolute truth. Text 38. His left leg was placed on his right thigh, and his left hand was placed on his left thigh. This seating posture is called Virasan. In his right hand, he held Rudraksha beads, and his finger was in the mode of argument. Text 39. All the sages and demigods, headed by Indra, offered their respectful obeisances unto Lord Shiva, and with folded hands. Lord Shiva was dressed in saffron garments and absorbed in trance, thus appearing to be the foremost of all sages. Text 40. Lord Shiva's lotus feet were worshipped by both demigods and demons, but still, in spite of his exalted position, as soon as he saw that Lord Brahma was there among all the other demigods, he immediately stood up and offered his respects by bowing down and touching his lotus feet. Just as Vamanadev offered his respectful obeisances to Kashyapa Muni. Text 41. All the sages who were sitting with Lord Shiva, such as Narada and others, also offered their respectful obeisances to Lord Brahma. After being so worshipped, Lord Brahma, smiling, began to speak to Lord Shiva. Text 42. Lord Brahma said, "My dear Lord Shiva, I know that you are the controller of the entire material manifestation, the combination, father and mother of the cosmic manifestation, and the supreme Brahman beyond the cosmic manifestation as well. I know you in that way." Text 43. My dear Lord, you create this cosmic manifestation, maintain it, and annihilate it by expansion of your personality, exactly as a spider creates, maintains, and winds up its web. Text 44. My dear Lord, your Lordship has introduced the system of sacrifices through the agency of Daksha, and thus one may derive the benefits of religious activities and economic development. Under your regulative principles, the institution of the four varnas and ashrams is respected. The Brahmins therefore vow to follow this system strictly.
Okay.
Text 45.
Somebody else can. Somebody else.
I've got a question for you.
Okay.
See in text 42, he says, Lord Brahma says to Shiva, I know that you are the control of the entire material manifestation. And then he says, then he goes on to say, you create this cosmic manifestation, maintain it and annihilate it. He doesn't. Lord Brahma does. He creates it. Lord Shiva doesn't.
Well, you've got to understand who Lord Shiva is. He's non-different from Vishnu. It's like...
Lord Brahma creates the material manifestation, doesn't he?
Well, wait a minute. First of all, we have to understand there's two creations we did in the second chapter. There's the Sarga and Visharga. And Lord Brahma is a secondary creator. Lord Vishnu is a primary creator who supplies all the ingredients and all the senses and the demigods, so that Lord Brahma can use them to create all the living entities in the universe and all the, yeah. And so, Lord Shiva is an expansion of Mahavishnu. It's non-different, but he's actually milk, which has been turned into yogurt by mixture of tamarind, similar when you mix tamarind with, or something sour with milk, it turns into yogurt. So in that way it's speaking. It's not it's actually he's in his own tattva.
So he's addressing him as like an expansion of Krishna, the supreme person, yeah?
Yeah, he's an expansion of, it's his own tattva, he's an expansion of Mahavishnu.
Okay, so he's not just been nice and kind of...
Yeah, so Mahavishnu is the one who supplies the ingredients, and so, he's an expansion of Mahavishnu. So in that way, he can speak like that,
But Maharaj, isn't Lord Shiva son of Brahma himself, Lord Brahma?
Rudra. Yeah, Lord Shiva is higher than Brahma. Lord Shiva is, Lord Brahma is in Jiva Tattva. But Shiva is Shiva Tattva. He's much more powerful. But for creation of the material world, for the pastime, when Brahma becomes angry, then Rudra comes from between his eyes. In that way, Lord Shiva manifests. But let's look at the birth of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna comes from the womb of Devaki. But does that mean that Devaki is more powerful than Lord Krishna? According to or it appears that way apparently. So it's the same thing. We have to understand the tattva, and the pastime will maybe appear to be contradictory, but if you understand the tattva, then we can understand the reality of the situation. Otherwise, nothing would make sense in the Bhagavatam, or a lot of things wouldn't make sense. We're used to seeing things in a linear way, that if he's in charge of him, he must be better than him, like that. But that's how it works or it should work in the material world.
Is that why it's called Mahadev then?
We can't, I've said before, we want to put everything on a t-shirt, and we want to get everything down so that we can condense it and put it on a t-shirt. So, this is the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But it's not like that, even the Acharyas disagree on certain points. But it's not that one's right and one's wrong. So we have to be a little bit flexible when we're reading these things and think, wait a minute, that's wrong. It's not like that. It's a Srimad Bhagavatam. All contradictions actually have some, conclusion. Seeming contradictions because of our tiny brain. But we just have to actually accept it, that, this is what the sages are saying, and the only way to explain it is or anybody can explain it differently, but that's my understanding. He's actually in charge of, is the superintendent deity in the charge, the mode of ignorance. So predominantly he's in a mode of destruction. He destroys the world at the end.
It happens a lot in Bhagavatam, Maharaj, doesn't it? You get people calling other people the supreme person. Everyone's calling each other, everyone's bigging each other up in the Bhagavatam.
Yeah, I mean, there's many contradictions in the Bhagavatam, but that's why I've got the Emperor verse. The Emperor verse is in first canto, chapter 3, text 28. Ete chamshai kalapumsha, Krishna stu Bhagavan Swayam. That Krishna is the original Lord, even though there's so many expansions mentioned there. Indriyani Vamlokam Midayanti Yuge Yuge. So when we see a contradiction, we always refer to this verse to understand, who is the actual supreme controller, and that modifies everything, rectifies everything. But for certain situations, the Bhagavatam is like from the feet to the head, and it's progressive. That there's different levels of knowledge and surrender.
I suppose what you're saying then, Maharaj, with that in mind, you can look how these other personalities relate to Krishna and do it that way.
What's that? Relate to Krishna?
Yeah, well,
You understand the absolute truth, you mean?
Yeah. So if someone's calling someone the supreme person, and you were saying there's the seed verse, which is Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam, I suppose the trick is to look how this person relates to the supreme person. That's why they'll be calling the supreme person, isn't it?
Yeah, well, even Lord Brahma were a little bit bewildered when he actually, not Lord Brahma, Narada Muni were a little bit bewildered. They were praying to Lord Brahma, and they were thinking, as far as I know, he's actually the supreme, but, why is he meditating? Who's he meditating on? And so he asked Lord Brahma, what are you meditating on? It seems like there's somebody superior to you. And yet Narada Muni is, an exalted Vaishnava. How could he not know that, there's somebody greater than Lord Brahma? It doesn't make sense, does it? So we have to understand that he's speaking for the benefit of the Bhagavatam and the reader. He's taking a part. Like Bhishma, he was actually sent to be on the wrong side. Why would a Vaishnava fight against Krishna? Because Krishna wanted it. So we're not controlled by our logical thinking when we're reading Bhagavatam. We're controlled by what Krishna wants, and he wants to actually present the message of devotional service, and so he decides how he's going to do it and who's going to do what. That's the top and bottom of it. And so he wants to say, well, wait a minute. He might say, I don't want to do that service. He said, listen, you're going to do it. No, he doesn't actually. He always leaves it up to the devotee. But we might think, I don't want to do that service. Like King Patiparudra, he was actually sweeping he's the king of Orissa. He was more powerful than any of the Muslim kings. But, he started sweeping in front of the Rath Yatra. He took that menial service. That's the nature of a devotee. Anyway, we're going off the track a little bit, but don't, just be a little bit patient when you read things like that. And just remember that, there's devotees who are doing different services in the Bhagavatam. It's not that they're they can only do one thing. They'll do what Krishna wants them to do. Like Arjuna, he's actually, how could he become bewildered? But he did. He became bewildered because it was necessary. Even in this movement, devotees take so many austerities to spread Krishna consciousness. It's not natural that anybody would want to do that. But why do they do it? Because, they feel that Krishna the spiritual masters asking for that, and therefore they can understand this is what Krishna wants. Why would anybody go to the lengths some of the devotees go to? I'm just reading about Jayapataka Maharaj, and it was on the I forget it, anyway. It was in the Yorkshire WhatsApp group, and you know, the disciples were writing about how different stages in his life he's been through different difficulties, and he attempted if he was going to leave his body, but he just wanted to actually carry on preaching. So, you know, he says some of the doctors say he shouldn't be in this world. It's just too difficult to live in a body like that. But he's deciding, you know, he wants to stay and preach. That's more or less what they were saying. I mean, I can't say any more than that, but I'm just emphasizing that, you know, Prabhupada, he went through so much difficulty, didn't he? And his spiritual master and Bhakti Vinod. So this is actually this is love. This is when we do something like that for the benefit to please Krishna and the spiritual master. So, you know, the point is all the devotees are actually trying to cooperate with what Krishna wants to spread the message of Bhagavatam. So if we just remember that, we won't become too confused. And remember this Emperor verse. Okay, so who's reading next? Jai Krishna, isn't it? Jai Krishna, it's your reading. Is anybody there?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Krishna Prabhu's microphone is muted.
Jai Krishna, can you hear me? Just nod your head if you can hear me. You can't hear me. It's froze. It's froze with fear.
Your answer froze him, Maharaj.
So, Karshana Prabhu, can you read?
The most auspicious Lord, O most auspicious Lord, you have ordained the heavenly planets, the spiritual Vaikuntha planets, and the impersonal Brahman sphere as the respective destinations of the performers of auspicious activities. Similarly, for others who are miscreants, you have destined different kinds of hells which are horrible and ghastly. Yet sometimes it is found that the destinations are just the opposite. It is very difficult to ascertain the cause of all this. My dear Lord, devotees who have fully dedicated their lives unto your lotus feet certainly observe your presence of Paramatma in each and every being, and as such, they do not differentiate between one living being and another. Such persons treat all living entities equally. They never become overwhelmed by anger like animals who can see nothing without differentiation. Persons who observe everything with differentiation, who are simply attached to fruitive activities, who are mean-minded, who are always pained to see the flourishing condition of others, and who thus give distress to them by uttering harsh and piercing words, have already been killed by providence. Thus there is no need for them to be killed again by an exalted personality like you. My dear Lord, if in some places materialists who are already bewildered by the insurmountable illusionary energy of the Supreme Godhead sometimes commit offenses, a saintly person with compassion does not take this seriously. Knowing that they commit offenses because they are overpowered by the illusionary energy, he does not show his prowess to counteract them. My dear Lord, you are never bewildered by the formidable influence of the illusionary energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you are omniscient and should be merciful and compassionate towards those who are bewildered by the same illusionary energy and are very much attached to fruitive activities. My dear Lord Shiva, you are a shareholder of a portion of the sacrifice, and you are the giver of the result. The bad priests do not deliver your share, and therefore you destroyed everything. and the sacrifice remains unfinished. Now you can do the needful and take your rightful share. My dear Lord, by your mercy, the performer of the sacrifice, King Daksha, may get back his life. Bhaga may get back his eyes, and Brigu his moustache, and Bhusha his teeth. O Lord Shiva, may the demigods and the priests whose limbs have been broken by your soldiers recover from the injuries by your grace. O destroyer of sacrifice, please take your portion of the sacrifice and let the sacrifice be completed by your grace.
Okay. Mataji, can you?
Chapter 7. The sacrifice performed by Daksha. The sage Maitreya said, O mighty armed Vidura, Lord Shiva, being thus specified by the words of Lord Brahma, spoke as follows in answer to Lord Brahma's request. Lord Shiva said, My dear father, Brahma, I do not mind the offenses created by the demigods, because these demigods are childish and less intelligent. I do not take a serious view of their offenses, and I have punished them only in order to right them. Lord Shiva continued, Since the head of Daksha had already been burned to ashes, he will have the head of a goat. The demigod known as Bhaga will be able to see his share of sacrifice through the eyes of Mitra. The demigod Pusha will be able to chew only through the teeth of his disciples, and if alone, he will have to satisfy himself by eating dough made from chickpea flour. For the demigods who have agreed to give me my share of the sacrifice will recover from all their injuries. Those who have had their arms cut off will have to work with the arms of the Ashwini Kumara, and those whose hands were cut off will have to do their work in the hands of Pusha. The priests will also have to act in that manner. As for Brigu, he will have the beard from the goat's head. The great sage Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, all the personalities present were very much satisfied in heart and soul upon hearing the words of Lord Shiva, who is the best among the Benedictors. Thereafter Brigu, the chief of the great sages, invited Lord Shiva to come to the sacrificial arena. Thus the demigods, accompanied by the sages, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, all went to the place where the great sacrifice was being performed. After everything was executed exactly as directed by Lord Shiva, Daksha's body was joined to the head of an animal meant to be killed in the sacrifice. When the animal's head was fixed on the body of King Daksha, Daksha was immediately brought to consciousness, and as he awakened from sleep, the king saw Lord Shiva standing before him. At that time, when Daksha saw Lord Shiva, who rides upon a bull, his heart, which was polluted by envy of Lord Shiva, was immediately cleansed, just as the water in a lake is cleansed by the autumn rains. King Daksha wanted...
Okay. So, Prabhupada explains how this shows that consciousness is not due to the brain, not due to the body, it's due to the soul. That even though he had a goat's head, he didn't have a goat's brain. You know what I mean? He had his original consciousness. So, sometimes you find that there's, it's not the size of the brain that counts. It's actually the consciousness which the soul can exhibit through a particular body. And the human form of life allows us to exhibit more consciousness than the other. But in this special case, they gave him a goat's head. Actually, because he'd been dumb like a goat, he'd acted like a goat. And it's pretty heavy punishment, isn't it? You know what I mean? But it's just Krishna's mercy, if we get so diverted by material consciousness, Krishna will rectify it. And it may not be very pleasant sometimes, that's the thing. Okay. What else is, what number are we on? 10.
I can read now, Maharaj. My internet went out, but I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Read from 11.
All right. King Daksha wanted to offer prayers to Lord Shiva, but as he remembered the ill-fated death of his daughter Sati, his eyes filled with tears, and in bereavement his voice choked up and he could not say anything. At this time, King Daksha, afflicted by love and affection, was very much awakened to his real senses. With great endeavour, he pacified his mind, checking his feelings, and with pure consciousness began to offer prayers to Lord Shiva. King Daksha said, "My dear Lord Shiva, I committed a great offence against you, but you are so kind that instead of withdrawing your mercy, you have done me a great favour by punishing me. You and Lord Vishnu never neglect even useless, unqualified Brahmins. Why then should you neglect me, who am engaged in performing sacrifices? My dear, great and powerful Lord Shiva, you were created first from the mouth of Lord Brahma in order to protect the Brahmins in pursuing education, austerity, vows, and self-realization. As protector of the Brahmins, you always protect the regulative principles they follow, just as a cowherd boy keeps a stick in his hand to give protection to the cows. I did not know your full glories. For this reason, I threw arrows of sharp words at you in the open assembly. Although you did not take them into account, I was going down to hell because of my disobedience to you, who are the most respectable personality. But you took compassion upon me and saved me by awarding punishment. I request that you be pleased by your own mercy, since I cannot satisfy you by my words." The great sage Maitreya said, "Thus being pardoned by Lord Shiva, King Daksha, with the permission of Lord Brahma, again began the performances of the yajna, along with the great learned sages, the priests, and others. Thereafter, in order to resume the activities of sacrifice, the Brahmins first arranged to purify the sacrificial arena of the contamination caused by the touch of Virabhadra and the other ghostly followers of Lord Shiva. Then they arranged to offer into the fire of oblations known as Purodas. The great sage Maitreya said to Vidura, "My dear Vidura, as soon as King Daksha offered the clarified butter with Yajurveda mantras in sanctified meditation, Lord Vishnu appeared there in his original form as Narayan. Lord Narayan was seated on the shoulder of Stotra or Garuda, who had big wings. As soon as the Lord appeared, all directions were illuminated, diminishing the luster of Brahma and the other present."
Okay,
And the other present.
so just stop there a minute. In text 15, there's a good point. Just a minute. I'll just read it, shall I? The purport. As usual, a devotee in an adverse condition of life accepts such a condition to be the mercy of the Lord. Factually, the insulting words used by Daksha against Lord Shiva were enough to have him thrown perpetually into a hellish life. But Lord Shiva, being kind toward him, awarded him punishment to neutralize the offense. King Daksha realized this and, feeling obliged for Lord Shiva's magnanimous behavior, wanted to show his gratitude. Sometimes a father punishes his child, and when the child is grown up and comes to his senses, he understands that the father's punishment was not actually punishment but mercy. Similarly, Daksha appreciated that the punishment offered to him by the Lord Shiva was a manifestation of Lord Shiva's mercy. That is a symptom of a person making progress on the path of Krishna consciousness. It is said that a devotee in Krishna consciousness never takes any miserable condition of life to be a condemnation by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He accepts a miserable condition to be the grace of the Lord. He thinks, I would have been punished or put into a more dangerous condition of life due to my past misdeeds, but the Lord has protected me. Thus, I have received only a little punishment as token execution of the law of karma. Thinking of his grace in that way, a devotee always surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead more and more seriously, and is not disturbed by such so-called punishment. So this is a really important point, that we shouldn't expect, devotional service to be a cakewalk. You know what I mean? It's actually going to be, as soon as we start putting everything in place, I'm done with 16 rounds, following the principles, I'm only taking prashadam. But it doesn't mean to say that we won't experience, you know, upheavals. Because we have a materialistic mentality, it's going to come through. And we're going to make mistakes, and we have to be checked so that we don't carry on down that wrong line. Because unless we're checked, we lose it. Is it? You know, somebody who seems to be an enemy, they're actually our friend. Somebody who just lets us get on with what we're doing and doesn't say anything, it means that they're just letting us go down the wrong way. But somebody who's, you know, correcting us, you know, we should try and understand that this may be good for us. It's reminding us what something we've forgotten. So that's the spiritual master's duty. It's a thankless task. When Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur was asked, he said, who'd want to be a spiritual master? He said, who'd want to actually have to, you know, become assertive with devotees? Usually we just want to serve devotees, but the spiritual master has to take the risk of, you know, exerting his will on devotees to purify them and still remain steady himself. So it's not easy, you know, if you're actually in that situation. And anyway, I think everybody understands that point, that we should always see the bright side, that this is actually helping me. And, you know, don't expect a clear path. According to our conditioning, there'll be obstacles. Hare Krishna. Anyway, I can see everybody's really enlivened now. Anyway. So carry on. Where did you get to? You got to 20 to 20 and 21 describe the Lord's form. So we'll go on to 22.
Or shall I just carry on?
Yeah.
Starting with 22?
Yeah.
Okay. As soon as Lord Vishnu was visible, all the demigods, Lord Brahma...
Actually, it's not the... What we should do, we should meditate on the Lord's form, and I'm missing it out. But, you know, it's good to read this yourself, these things. We could read through everything, but I'm just trying to make it more practical. If you think we ought to read it, we can. I'll just read Sham is blackish in complexion. Hiranya Rasana, golden yellow garments. Arka Kirita Justaha, crown as dazzling as the sun. Nila Alaka Brahma, hair bluish like a black bees. And a black bees. Face decorated with earrings. 8 hands, he appeared in his 8 armed form, with his weapons as well as the 4 usual things like lotus conch, whereas gada and disc. Body appeared like a blue lotus flower. The chest was decorated with the goddess of fortune and a garland. Face decorated with beautiful glances, smiling attitude that captivated the entire world, especially the devotees. Okay, just 2 more things. Just a minute. And he had a white canopy over his head. Okay, carry on.
22, yeah. As soon as Lord Vishnu was visible, all the demigods, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, the Gandharvas, and all present there immediately offered their respectful obeisances by falling down straight before him. In the presence of the glaring effulgence of the bodily luster of Narayan, everyone else's luster faded away, and everyone stopped speaking, fearful with awe and veneration. All present touched their hands to their heads and prepared to offer their prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead at Oxygen. Although the mental scope of even demigods like Brahma was unable to comprehend the unlimited glories of the Supreme Lord, they were all able to perceive the transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his grace. Only by such grace could they offer their respectful prayers according to their different capacities. The Lord Vishnu accepted the oblations offered in the sacrifice. Daksha, the Prajapati, began with great pleasure to offer respectful prayers unto him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the master of all sacrifices and preceptor of all the Prajapatis, and he is served even by such personalities as Nanda and Sananda. Daksha addressed the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Lord, you are transcendental to all speculative positions. You are completely spiritual, devoid of all fear, and you are always in control of the material energy. Even though you appear in the material energy, you are situated transcendentally. You are always free from material contamination because you are completely self-sufficient. The priest.
Anyway, you know, Daksha offers prayers, the priests, the assembled members, Lord Shiva, Bhrigu, Brahma, Indra, the wives of the performers, sages, siddhas, Prasuti, Lokapala, everybody offered prayers to the Lord. So that's what we're speaking about now. And when Bhrigu offered prayers, actually some of them, they were criticising others when they were offering prayers indirectly. And this was pointed out by the Acharyas to some degree. Even now, Brahma, Shiva do not know the truth about you. Ignorantly, they say, I know. This is what the Acharyas deciphered from what they were saying. Anyway, in text 30, Bhrigu was talking, and the commentary is that one shouldn't depend even slightly on one's own ability to go back to Godhead. One should come to the point of completely depending on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we have to understand that properly, that we make maximum effort, but we're always aware that how can we overcome Maya, you know? It's impossible. So we should understand that. And, you know, we try hard to follow, but we are always completely dependent on Krishna. Between 42, we do surrender to the Lord completely, then we get completely protected from any sinful reaction. So when in doubt, what's the rest of it? When in doubt,
get your beadbags out.
get your bead bag out. That's the best way to surrender.
That's the one.
Do a few extra rounds. Did you hear that, Mataji? Did you hear that? When in doubt, get your bead bag out. Very good, very good. Okay. That's our constitution. Our only constitution is to serve God. And everything else we think about is just a complete waste of time. Of course, we have to gradually develop that. All right, so we go from text 48. And who's next? It's Ambada.
Maharaj, in the text 48.
Yeah.
Sri Maitreya said, after Lord Vishnu was glorified by all present, Daksha, his consciousness purified, arranged to begin again the Jagna which had been devastated by the followers of Lord Shiva. Text 49, Maitreya continued, my dear sinless Vidura, Lord Vishnu is actually the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, yet because of his being the super soul of all living entities, he was satisfied simply with his share of the sacrifice offerings. He therefore addressed Daksha in a pleasing attitude. Lord Vishnu replied, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and I are the supreme cause of the material manifestation. I am the super soul, the self-sufficient witness, but impersonally there is no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva, and me. Text 51. The Lord continued, my dear Daksha, Vidya, I am the original personality of Godhead. But in order to create, maintain, and annihilate cosmic manifestations, I act through my material energy. And according to the different grades of activity, my representations are differently named. Text 52. The Lord continued, one who is not proper knowledge, not in proper knowledge, thinks that demigods like Brahma and Shiva are independent, or even thinks that the living entities are independent. Text 53. A person with average intelligence does not think the head or the other parts of the body to be separate. Similarly, my devotees does not differentiate Vishnu, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, from anything or any living entity. Text 54. The Lord continued, one who does not consider Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or the living entities in general to be separate from the Supreme, and who knows Brahman actually realizes peace, others do not. Text 55. The sage Maitreya said, Daksha, the head of the Prajapatis, having been nicely instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshipped Lord Vishnu. After worshipping him by performing the prescribed sacrificial ceremonies, Daksha separately worshipped Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Text 56. With all respect, Daksha worshipped Lord Shiva with his share of the remnants of the yajna. After finishing the ritualistic sacrificial activities, he satisfied all the other demigods and other people assembled there. Then after finishing all these duties with the priests, he took a bath and was fully satisfied. Text 57. Thus, worshipping the Supreme Lord Vishnu by the ritualistic performance of sacrifice, Daksha was completely situated on the religious path. Moreover, all the demigods who assembled at the sacrifice blessed him that he might increase his piety, and then they left. Text 58. Maitreya said, I have heard that after giving up the body she received from Daksha, Dakshayani, his daughter, took her birth in the kingdom of the Himalayas. She was born as the daughter of Mena. I heard this from authoritative sources. Text 59. Ambika, goddess Durga, who was known as Dakshayini, Sati, again accepted Lord Shiva as her husband, just as different energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead act during the course of a new creation. Text 60. Maitreya said, my dear Vidura, I've heard this story of the Daksha Yagna, which was devastated by Lord Shiva from Uddhava, the great devotee and disciple of Brahaspati. Text 61. The great sage Maitreya concluded, if one hears and again narrates with faith and devotion this story of Daksha Yagna, as it was conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, then certainly one is cleared of all contamination of material existence, O son of Kuru.
Okay. So that completes chapter 7. And okay, so next week we start with the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. So this is also very informative. And any questions on that? Is everybody satisfied? You can read the purports yourself in your own time. I try to read them and just comment on the important points. Oh, well, everything is important, but what I see to be, relevant to me anyway. And hopefully it's relevant to others. Okay, so thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So we'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry I wasn't
Thank you.
able to read Joe
See
properly.
you next week.
you next week.
Hare Krishna.